And welcome to Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co-host, Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Keith. How are you today?
I'm good, and we're continuing on in this series about the alumni from Oak Ridge High School who have made an impact in the world.
Absolutely. Benita, before you start, and we have Benita Albert with us, a retired teacher from the Oak Ridge High School. But before you start, repeat what you told me when we were just waiting to get started about the most recent one that you're working on. It's so current. Tell the audience just a little about that.
Oh, I had an amazing interview with Don Johns, class of 1975, who just made the news, quietly, of course, but you may have seen that there is a new drug for the treatment of ALS, Lou Gehrig's, better known as Lou Gehrig's disease, and a particular form of it, a genetic form of it. That was his drug, his work of recent note. He has an amazing Oak Ridge roots story. His mom was a Calutron girl. His dad began work in Oak Ridge in 1943, is considered one of the original people from Oak Ridge. And he just had incredible memories from here. Looking forward to writing that one up and telling you about it in the future.
All right, that's really good. As I said earlier, it's amazing where these Oak Ridge alumni will show up. Just amazing things that they've accomplished. So,
and how much good they're doing for the world.
I agree. A lot of good being done for the world from people out of Oak Ridge. All right, let's pick up with your presentation now. I think we're ready to go.
All right, we are covering one more from the 70s that we didn't get to last time. Julia Watson graduated in the class of 1979. Looking at her picture here, I always thought of Julia as Miss Sunshine. She was always so enthusiastic, brought so much personality to the classroom, to the students around her who loved her, in spite of many, many obstacles she faced early on in life. Julia began at Glenwood School. She went on to Jefferson and then to Oak Ridge High School. But the brutal truth about her young life was that she was in those schools only 50% of her entire school career. At age 7, she was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, one of the first and most severe cases seen in East Tennessee. So early parts of her childhood, age 7 through probably 12, she spent many days in the hospital in Vanderbilt with specialists there. I think that, that's not the important part of her story. It's what she did in spite of all odds. So her husband, she later married Steve McClanahan from the class of Oak Ridge High School class of 1972. Her husband discovered after her death in 2019, a set of diaries, journals that she had kept up with up until just about 5 years before her death. And in those journals, he realized was a wealth of information, not only for chronically ill people, but for everyone to learn to cope and make the best of your situation. That was most certainly Julia. I'm sorry, let me go back to her husband for a minute. Steve then decided that he would write a book about her journey, and that published a couple of years ago. It's called My Life with Chronic Illness and God's Grace. So her story is bigger than her affliction. She became a wife, a mother, and a leading advocate at the local, state, and national levels for the Arthritis Foundation. She could not attend grades 2 through 4 due to her arthritis, and most of her junior high years. She praised the Oak Ridge School's homebound services that kept her up along with her mother and others, and provided caring support. And she also praised the patience of her teachers. And she mentioned specifically fifth grade teacher Roger Toller. She returned to Glenwood in fifth grade. And Roger was a legendary educator in the Oak Ridge schools, but he really, really went out of his way to make sure that Julia got to every special event, even when handicap access was not assured. He would carry her, or they would roll her around. It sounds terrible, but they were determined that she be included on the audio-visual cart to the cafeteria and other places where it would be difficult for her to access. Handicap laws have changed dramatically since her time in school. She finished Oak Ridge High School with numerous AP course credits, which is amazing because some of that work had to be done from home. And those AP credits gave her advanced standing at Vanderbilt University. So she headed off to Vanderbilt. She had really, really been influenced by all of the medical staff who had worked with her, and she knew she wanted to go into medicine. So she chose pre-med undergraduate coursework. But the problem she encountered there was the labs. She simply could not stand vertically for long hours to perform the labs, and ultimately decided, I just can't do this. She completed a degree with honors in molecular biology. She then came back to Oak Ridge, married Steve in 1983. In fact, I remember this well. They were the chosen bride and groom of the month for the Oak Ridger magazine in that year. It was fun to read about them. And she was employed at ORHS in epidemiological research. She adopted 2 boys, and she loved telling this story, so I will repeat it in honor of Julia. I quote Julia. "One son on a field trip, which I chaperoned, advised the group of friends he was with that she was to watch, now don't run because my mom has arthritis and is like a turtle sometimes." And Julia would laugh when she would tell that. Her chronic illness advocacy was recognized by Frankie Avalon, for those who remember Frankie, a good-looking and great singer of the time. But anyway, she was recognized by Frankie Avalon at a charity dinner in Knoxville. When he started speaking, he kept talking about the extraordinary work, and she was wondering, well, who could it be? Who could it be? I know most people here. It was Julia. Afterwards, he hugged and kissed her on the cheek, and she was over the moon, didn't wash her cheek for the longest time. She won numerous awards, as I said, at state national levels. She was offered a position on the National Arthritis Foundation Board later in her life, but it was just too much. Her disease was progressing. But she stayed active. She was a Sunday school teacher, a volunteer tutor in the schools, stayed very, very active. And one amazing story that's discussed further in the book, she accompanied 1,200 chronically ill children, can you imagine the logistics of that, to Washington, D.C., where they met with congressional leaders, took a picture, not on the Capitol steps like they usually do. They had to move it to, I believe it was the South Lawn of the White House to accommodate the children, and the lawmakers came over to be in it. That meeting alone with congressional leaders obtained $1.24 billion for arthritis research. Wow. She, as I said, died in September of 2019. It was soon after attending her 40th Oak Ridge High School class reunion. And I was there, and I saw her walk in just beaming, absolutely beaming at being back with dear, dear friends. Julia was an inspiration to all of them, to me, to anyone who knew her. And Ray, I know that you heard from people about her as well in the community who greatly admired her courage.
I did. You're exactly right. She was really an amazing person, and anyone who knew her would say the same thing about her.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
Well, let's move on to the 80s. In 1981, Todd Livesey graduated from Oak Ridge High School. I knew Todd. I had him as a sophomore in Algebra 1 class, and he was a ball of fire. He started in the Oak Ridge schools at Elm Grove, then on to Jefferson Junior High, and graduated from Oak Ridge High School. Here's what Todd told me about himself, and I'm quoting him. "I loved drawing and building from an early age. I especially appreciated my course in welding at Oak Ridge High School with teacher Bill Moser. It was truly an advanced course." The second semester of his senior year, Todd was in the TAT program, which stood for Training in Technology. That program was located outside the gates of Y12 and was sponsored by Union Carbide and Y12 as a 25-week immersion. Here's what he said again, quoting, "Because of my Oak Ridge High School training, I finished the course in half the time and became the assistant to the instructor." And then he mentioned that, he wanted TAT. He knew that in his senior year, but they allotted only one person per school typically. And he came in second to another classmate whom he admired. But he was so disappointed that he told his boss, the famous Ed Newsell, Big Ed, about it. And he had been an employee of Big Ed's for, I think, since his 8th grade. He'd worked for Big Ed. And so Big Ed, his after-school boss, knew some contacts, told them about Todd, told him how disappointed he was, and he got a position in TAT. He thought the world of Big Ed. Todd went on to UT. He got a teaching certificate in industrial arts in the College of Technical Education. He actually did some welding work before he started at UT, but it was in Virginia. He was homesick. He wanted to be back in his home territory, so he chose to go to UT. So with his certificate in industrial arts in the College of Technical Education, he became later a state trainer on diversified technology, part of the career tech educational program in Tennessee. He built one of the largest tech student associations in each school he taught in Knox County, and I believe that was 3 different high schools over his tenure there. But in 99, he was hired by the Oak Ridge Schools. And after he came to Oak Ridge Schools, he completed both a master's and an educational specialist degree, many training, certifications, and degrees beyond. He's just a ball of energy, absolutely, always has been. When I would see him in town, he had another project going, not just his school projects. He's also an excellent cabinet maker and car restorer. So it was always fun to talk to Todd, but his real claim to fame is one random Sunday morning meeting in church with Patrick Hull, from the class of Oak Ridge High School class of 1992. Patrick Hull was a NASA engineer, and they got to talking, and Todd told him, "I want a creative STEM project for my Robertsville middle school students." And that became the Ramsat satellite. That's what they called it for Robertsville Middle School. Their mascot is a ram, okay, which orbited the Earth, and its goal was to gather reforestation data from the disastrous Smoky Mountain Gatlinburg fire. Now, the project itself lasted, I would guess, at least 4 years, from conception to design, all of this done with Robertsville students and community support, scientific support. Quite an ambitious project. The end of it completed during COVID confinement, but Robertsville can now claim that they are the first middle school in space. The satellite burned up just recently. I know that it was expected. They expected no more than about 18 months in space. I have not seen the results of what they were able to garner in terms of information, but what they learned in building it and launching it was phenomenal. Todd has moved now and is full-time at Oak Ridge High School, and he's setting up a new and exciting STEM lab in the career tech development or career tech department there. Watch out, watch him. He's going to come up with something else phenomenal.
I don't doubt it. Getting that satellite up was an amazing accomplishment.
Yes, a true community effort. The students learned so much, and so many of the students involved have gone on to science at the collegiate level now. All right. Class of 1982, Bill Nallen. He started at Cedar Hill, moved on to Jefferson, and then to Oak Ridge High School. And he reached way back, either first or second grade. He couldn't remember for sure, but he remembered Mrs. Chapman's classroom had a kiddie pool in it full of moss, lichen, fish, and crawdads. It's amazing what they remember and, what they value. Okay. From Jefferson, he remembered Clifford Smith's geometry class. And he said, he really worked my brain. Well, yeah, he was a junior high student in geometry. He was on his way to greatness. He wanted to mention Coach McNamee and the 81 cross-country state championship that they earned in his junior year. Bill said, that was so important to be involved in sports and be outside of just the advanced track to get to know other students. And he virtually knew no one when he started track in junior high. But he said, I made lasting friendships there. He laughed and said, the kids knew I was different from the most of them, and they decided that my name should be Professor. They still call him that today. I was at a reunion and heard that. He was my student in Calculus 2, Calculus BC and Calculus 2. That was his junior and senior years. And he gave me one of the most wonderful compliments. Forgive me for self-indulging, but this is his quote. Calculus 2 was the basis for everything I did to build the Da Vinci surgical robot. It's when I first learned how to do that. Is that amazing? Cal 2 is a lot of vector calculus, and that is what a robotic arm does. That is indeed what he was talking about. I remember that 30 years after his graduation, this man walked in my classroom. I had no idea who he was, calling me Mrs. Albert. That was my first clue. He's probably a former student. Sat down and said, I need to talk to you. I will soon have a surgical robot on the market. Now, I've got to tell you, I'd heard of such things, but it still was fantastical, to say the least. And so we talked quite a while, and he said the approval here in this country was so difficult that they moved the approval proceedings to France. And he says, I think it will be out in another year or so. Well, sure enough, I got a message from him saying, it's been approved. In fact, I'm going to be in Oak Ridge to feature the robot or share it with the community. And while I'm there, I'd love to visit you. And I said, well, if you visit me, you're going to visit my classes. They need to see you. They need to see what's going on. And in fact, I was able to find a big enough room that we could combine 3 math classes in one room to hear him for 2 separate periods. So there was about 120 or so students who got to see his presentation. Bill walked in and absolutely charmed him from the start with robotic arms, robotic hands, things that, he had brought to explain to them the mechanics of a robot. And he called it simple mathematics, the mathematics they could do in high school to understand this. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, he could be such a phenomenal teacher. And in fact, he has gone on to do some of that. But the kids were absolutely enraptured by it. And we had a lot of trouble, getting one class out to get the other class in because they didn't want to leave. They still wanted to play with the robot. Well, he made the mistake of telling them that the full contraption, the full robot would be on display at Methodist Medical Center that day. It was a Wednesday. And, they were welcome to come by and see it. I got a phone call that Wednesday afternoon asking me to come down that they had a problem. They had so many students lined up, monopolizing the machine that somebody needed to try to free it up. It wasn't easy to do, but I was honored to sit at it myself and operate, not operate on any one, operate the mechanism. So Bill went to the University of Virginia as an Eccles Scholar, their highest scholarship. And he graduated as the top student in his 2 majors of applied math and physics, which makes sense for the new field he was entering, and new at the time. He went on to Harvard, and his dissertation designed and built a robotic model of the human hand. He was setting his future. He is now the Chief Executive Officer of Intuitive Surgical, where he is the principal design engineer on the Da Vinci surgical system. He is constantly modifying it to adapt to more and more general surgeries. Even my husband's recent knee replacement used his robot. His advice to students, and boy, does he live this advice. I'm quoting him. Communication gets more important as technology keeps advancing, because as a technologist, you must cross tribal boundaries to get anything done. Good listening, writing, speaking skills are essential. He's got all of that. And he did mention, that it's so important because he does have to sit down with doctors and other engineers, create a tribe, as he used the word, to accomplish what he does. He often has visited live surgeries, to see how not only his robot is doing, but to see surgeries where his robot yet applies, but he is looking for, what's needed, what could help. An amazing, amazing man. Very proud of him.
And rightly so. That Da Vinci robot is it's a life-saving tool that's been created and as you say, used here in Oak Ridge, but all over the world now. It's amazing.
Yeah, lots and lots, a million or more people a year.
Wow, that's astounding. Okay, let's go on.
All right, same class of 1982, and Laura Edwards. Laura started at Linden and went on to Robertsville and then to Oak Ridge High School. But she especially wanted to remember an English teacher at Robertsville Middle School, and that was Judy Kidd. And Judy Kidd was well known in this community, not only as a teacher, but also an artist. Very, very active in the arts in Oak Ridge. She said about Mrs. Kidd, and I'm quoting again, Judy Kidd's English at Robertsville, it was junior high school, I said middle school earlier, was the first time we talked about the structure of the books we were reading. Characters, plot, imagery, symbolism, narrative. It was eye-opening for me. And now Laura is an esteemed historical author, a speaker, and a professor right now at Princeton. Her passion for writing, she says, was further encouraged by Carol Yoakley's AP English and John Shedd's AP European History, both well known and respected Oak Ridge High School teachers. And about Shedd, whom she recently dedicated a book to him, Shedd taught me to use primary documents alongside the textbook to analyze. Basically, he was asking all of the class to become historians. He set my future. She got her undergraduate degree from Northwestern in American culture. And of that, she said, history courses made me realize you could write nonfiction, constructing compelling stories using evidence from the past. And that's what I would use to describe her work, her writing since. She now serves as a Princeton Distinguished Chair Professor in the History of Law and Liberty. She writes on marginalized people of the 19th century, the enslaved, free people of color, and women. Her books include Scarlet Doesn't Live Here Anymore. It's about women in the South in the pre-Civil War, post-Civil War era. And her latest book is entitled Only the Clothes on Her Back. And I have been reading this. I had to pause in the middle of it, and I will get back to it. But it is an amazing book, Only the Clothes on Her Back. And I thought I would read a bit of it so you get a sense of how she tells history, a bit of the cover description. Only the Clothes on Her Back uncovers practices commonly known then, but now long forgotten, which made textiles, clothing, cloth, bedding, and accessories such as shoes and hats, a unique form of property that people without rights could own and exchange. The value of textiles depended on law, and it was law that turned these goods into a secure form of property for marginalized people who not only use these textiles as currency, credit, and capital, but also as an entree into the new republic's economy and governing institution. It's amazing, just amazing. I had one more thing. Yeah, she has made presentations before the Supreme Court. She's published numerous op-eds in prestigious publications and is absolutely charming, interesting to talk to. The quote she wanted to leave with me as sort of a summary of how she feels about her work is the following. History is not something we can leave behind. It's a part of us, whether we like it or not.
Oh, wow.
Woo. Gives you pause in this day and age, doesn't it?
Does. Absolutely does. That's amazing. All right, let's move on.
All right, 1983, Otto Yang graduated. He started at Linden, went on to Jefferson, and then to Oak Ridge High School. He told me such a poignant story that I want to read a bit of what he said. A first grade friend of mine was diagnosed with leukemia. She sat next to me. I was a very shy boy. and a poor English-speaking child, and she was kind to me. When she came back to school after treatment for her leukemia and at her insistence, she had no hair, was very weak, but oh so brave. When she died soon after, I knew then that I wanted to become a doctor. That was at Linden. His favorite classes later on, as you know, his English skills developed and he adjusted to school, were geometry and developing a true appreciation for proof in Clifford Smith's, that had to be geometry class at Jefferson Junior High School. Remember, we heard about him earlier. He mentioned English with Ruth Cates Baird and Carol Yoakley at Oak Ridge High School, and said they taught me clarity of thought and writing, which became very important in his career. He had AP Calculus, BC, and Calculus 2 with me, and he said, it is the foundation for how I think about everything. Science in its purest form. I feel like I should read that again, right? Science in its purest form. He had an orchestra with a famous Edgar Meyer, both at Linden and Oak Ridge High School. And he said that instilled my love of music. He's just a true Renaissance man. He attended Brown University for 7 years and took him through medical school. He moved on to do a residency at the well-known New York City Bellevue Hospital. And his work was with the AIDS patients at the time, at the height of the AIDS crisis. He had many interesting stories to tell from that. He is a physician scientist in infectious diseases. He worked at Harvard Medical School, developing immune-based treatments and vaccines. And he did much work with AIDS medication treatments. He is now, and you know, this title will change as the disease has waned, but I was able to interview him in March of, I believe, 2020, just as vaccines were being released for COVID. At that time, he was the lead COVID scientist at UCLA Medical Center, and he was the Western spokesperson on issues regarding COVID. He was the Tony Fauci, if you please, in some sense, on the West Coast. That's how I heard about him. You know, news travels fast. Did you know Otto was the person that is considered the expert on COVID? No, I didn't, but I sure got hold of him. And I felt really, really relieved that someone with a mind of his, in fact, was in charge of that initiative. In talking to him later, after the article came out, I believe, he said to me, you know, recalling that first grade experience, I decided to look up the mother of his little first grade friend and reconnect with her. And she was deeply, deeply touched by that. I could imagine that meant a lot, not only to her, but certainly to Otto as well. When we talked at the stage that the vaccines were just becoming available for everyone, it expressed great relief that Mark and I, my husband and I, had received our first vaccines. At the time, he was working very, very heavily on a drug that I had never heard until he mentioned to me, working with this as a treatment for COVID. That drug was named Remdesivir. And shortly after I got that information from Otto, I began to see it mentioned routinely in the press. So he was definitely on the forefront of COVID.
Oh, amazing. All right.
Another hero. All right, Nikki Caldwell. If you're wondering why Nikki's picture is different, you know, we've been using the senior yearbook pictures. Well, Nikki was never around, I guess, for her senior picture or her junior picture or whatever. She was very, very involved in summer basketball. I can't remember the name of the program now, but national competitions. So we had plenty of basketball pictures of her, and we picked one of those up. Nikki had an interesting beginning in the Oak Ridge schools. Her mother, Jean, Oak Ridge High School class of 1970, was a model who traveled widely for modeling engagements in her early childhood. But Jean wanted Nikki raised in the Oak Ridge School. So Nikki lived with her grandparents and or her mother, depending on her mother's schedule. And so she attended three different elementary schools, Glenwood, Linden, and Woodland, over her first years. She said in moving through the three elementary programs, or she bragged, that the transitions were seamless due to the strong curriculum alignment in the schools. I quote her, "I did not suffer from the moves, and I got to know a lot of kids." Interesting what they remember. She praised SECME, which is an acronym for Southeastern Consortium for Minorities in Engineering, where she said, "I found a life beyond basketball." And she mentioned specifically it was through SECME that she was able to travel during spring breaks, fall breaks, whatever, with that group to colleges, to see different colleges, to expand her horizons. Nikki was a nationally ranked high school basketball player. And she was the first Oak Ridge High School girl to receive a UT basketball scholarship and to play under the legendary coach, Pat Summitt, whom she adored. She was an important member of the 1989 Oak Ridge High School state champs and is remembered for her strong defensive play in overtime, securing a national championship for UT in her freshman year at UT. She made her name early. They beat, I believe, the University of Virginia. Yes. Nikki proudly speaks of her mentor coaches, first Jill Pruden and Lynn Berkey in the Oak Ridge schools, and later Pat Summitt. She said that she used so much of what she learned under them in her later coaching career. She had college coaching assignments at the University of Virginia, at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, at UCLA, and at LSU. And when I interviewed her, she was the coach at LSU, but it was in the midst of COVID confinement. The season had been shut down. That's probably why I got a chance to get to her, because she had a bit of free time. But she was talking about putting the emphasis during that time on academics, keeping her girls motivated and up with their academics. She is now the president of the WNBA Las Vegas Aces. And in that capacity, she has recently hired another Oak Ridge High School star, Jennifer Azzi, who was Oak Ridge High School class of 1986, on her executive team. And just recently, this is a name that's known in Tennessee, certainly, she recruited Candace Parker to join in part of the executive responsibilities. I've got other things on her. She is an articulate media presence. A lot of practice with that, not just from coaching, but she also did sports analysis while she was in Los Angeles. She's a well-known leader of charitable drives. She and Holly Warlick rode their motorcycles across America to support breast cancer. I asked her about her motorcycle. While she was at LSU, she got herself a gold and purple, of course, their colors, motorcycle decked out. But she admitted she didn't ride it much anymore, that she was a mother, and she was a bit more cautious. She married Justin Fargas, who was a professional player with the Oakland Raiders, and her father-in-law, Justin's dad, is Antonio Fargas. Some people might remember him as Huggy Bear on Starsky and Hutch. She's lived a charmed life, is now, deserving of everything she's earned, and yet she is such a caring, giving, wonderful, wonderful person to talk to. It was my pleasure. She wanted to also mention that her grandfather Ray, I know you've written about this, was one of the original Oak Ridge Bombers black
Yeah.
baseball team, right? And became their coach later, I believe, right?
Yes, he did. That's
Yeah.
right. That family is an amazing family.
Yes. Yes. Her brother is a former professional player, now coach. Yes. Mike. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
Time for this one? All
Yes.
right, let's move on to the class of 1993 and Patrick Caton. Patrick started at Linden, moved on to Robertsville and Oak Ridge High School. He mentioned special courses that he valued that have had an influence on him later, one of which was combined studies. Many, many students mentioned that. And the other were his advanced math classes. Patrick was a super swimmer. And with those skills, he won a scholarship to Stanford and was part of the 94 national championship team in his freshman year. He gave up swimming, though, because he had ambitions, academic ambitions that taxed enough that he felt he couldn't handle both to the level that he wished. He got undergraduate degrees in an interesting mix in psychology and mechanical engineering. After which he decided to teach 8th grade science for a while and high school math, right? And he had in his 8th grade science room, can you imagine how the kids felt about this? A 98 Corvette engine to demonstrate and take apart. You know, they loved it. He returned to Stanford for a PhD in mechanical engineering. And as of 2005, he joined the U.S. Naval Academy. He's now a professor in mechanical engineering courses. And I'm going to digress and say that, you know, I knew all of this. I knew, of course, that he would be a star in whatever he did because he always goes above and beyond. But here is what I personally saw and experienced. He designed an innovative course. That course is entitled Energy Analysis, Policy, and Security, which he teaches with other professors from economics, oceanography, and political science departments. Kind of the first of its kind, at least there. My daughter and my husband and I were privileged to be invited to attend one of his classes, one of those multidisciplinary classes that he designed. It was very dynamic, fast-paced, and had strong student interaction. I didn't know what I would expect to see, but I will tell you, it was absolutely amazing. My daughter, afterwards, in speaking to him, said the class reminded her of combined studies. And Patrick confessed that it was definitely in his mind when he designed the course. He has won numerous teaching awards, and I can see why, observing him. He is also a volunteer firefighter and an EMT, as well as a wilderness EMT. It was so special. I cannot begin to describe how special it was to sit and watch a former student teach the class and to see the intellect and the passion he brought to the classroom. But I will also say that my husband, who is a Navy veteran, was over the moon excited to sit in a Naval Academy classroom to talk to they were mostly seniors, the seniors in the class, and to listen to the lecture. He was talking about fuel efficiency studies and, you know, what is the best car? What is the brutal reality of fuel efficiency, whatever. And it was so, so good that I discovered midway through, my husband was answering out loud with the students. And I said, poked him and said, no, 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 this is their class, Mark. But that's the kind of personality he brings to the classroom. And I know he's continuing to do that. I know an earlier project of his was to use the French fry oil, the oils produced in cooking from the school cafeteria, to fuel a motorized vehicle around campus, right? It's that hands-on experience that students have to love.
Oh, oh, that's amazing. I'll tell you, we've got some really neat stories that you're bringing to us, and we really do appreciate that. There are several more to come, and we will continue with this series as long as it takes to get to all of them that you. The tremendous resource that we're putting together, I believe, on the history of those alums from Oak Ridge. So,
You know, one of the interesting things that I was thinking of while you were going through this is, you know, I graduated from high school in the mid '70s, so a lot of these people are my contemporaries, and it reminded me of a story. I was at a film festival a few years ago and two of the guests were Ernest Borgnine and George Lindsay, you know, Goober from the Andy Griffith Show. And I didn't know that Ernest Borgnine and George Lindsay had been friends in Hollywood for like 40 years. They were like best friends. And so one evening they had a special tribute to Ernest Borgnine. He was, gosh, well into his 80s at this point. And it was 2 hours, and it was wonderful. I mean, you know, they showed clips from his movies. They showed his Academy Award speech when he won the Academy Award. And, you know, it was a very emotional and moving evening to honor him. And then they asked George Lindsay to get up and say a few words about his friend. And he got up to the microphone, and the first thing that he said was, "Well, that makes my hee-haw career look like crap." so I guess it's best for us not to compare ourselves to our contemporaries. You know, I guess we all do our own unique things in the world.
stop and think about it. The Da Vinci robot.
Yeah,
Hard
exactly.
to compare to that.
Exactly. So anyway, but yeah, it's amazing, and I would dare say that, you know, the graduates, and I didn't go to Oak Ridge High School, but I would dare say that if you did statistics about how many what percentage of people made a significant contribution to our society, that Oak Ridge would be way, way up there as far as comparing it to other schools in our region. So,
and that's one reason that I'm so proud that Benita has done this, and she's been writing these historically speaking columns now for a number of years, and we're not through. There continue to be more opportunities out there, but I do think that it's unique that she has taken the energy and the initiative to actually document these accomplishments. I doubt that many other schools in the nation have that kind of reference material being created about their alumni. And Keith, I would agree. Oak Ridge can stand tall with any school in the nation for contributing to the world and the betterment of the people across the world.
You know, and I think there's probably a combination of reasons for that. I think probably one of those, just, you know, talking one obviously historically Oak Ridge schools has always been an excellent school system. Okay, there's no question about that. Everybody knows that. But I think also you've got, you know, generations of people going through the Oak Ridge School that come from backgrounds and families that value education and value ambition and want to do things. I think that's just the culture that was, I don't know if it is anymore, but that was the culture of the community and the types of people that came to Oak Ridge and worked in Oak Ridge, which which makes sense. It's always been a center for scientific innovation and excellence, and it attracts those types of people to it.
And
Could I add that, yes, the science is strong here, but I so often hear from the kids about the arts, right?
Mhm.
The additional offerings unique to Oak Ridge at the time, certainly the playhouse, orchestras, whatever. One of my efforts has been not to just dwell on the science. We have a lot of scientists coming out of Oak Ridge High School, and thank God we do, right? But we also have tremendous artists, writers, historians, whatever, all over the place. And so I'm very, very proud that the curriculum and the community created a diverse experience for our students, right? Almost in some cases, a conflict in our students, because many of them love math, but they love music, right? Or whatever. And those are interesting stories to tell as well. But what I've tried to do is just look across all areas, all disciplines, to see who's out there. And every time I go after a particular topic, there's somebody there.
And I think that goes hand in hand. I think it goes hand in hand with the fact that people who and the scientists and those that are technically interested and advanced, they've been exposed to artistic endeavors.
Mhm.
They appreciate that. So some of the finest musicians and actors that I have ever known
Mhm.
are scientists or doctors, or those kinds of things. So I think it's an amalgamation of the kind of culture that we have, that we've had in the city of Oak Ridge, that contributes to all of those areas. And you all know this as well. When the people came to Oak Ridge for the Manhattan Project, the scientists were the ones that started all the arts organizations.
Yeah.
They realized the value of it and for their city, and that's kind of how all that started. So anyway.
And you're right, Oak Ridge is unique in that a lot of the scientifically minded people were centered here, especially in the early years. But that has continued. If you just stop and look at what's being done in the Oak Ridge National Laboratory today, I mean, you talked about the COVID research and the individual that was on the forefront out west. Well, some of the calculations that had to do with developing the virus was actually done at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So we've been right in the forefront of that and continue to be. And I must mention me having a little insight into this. Benita and Jessica have written an article about this year, 2023, graduating seniors, and it'll be out in the Oak Ridger this next week. That'll give you some insight into the fact that Oak Ridge is still producing some amazing students that are coming through the program. So,
Ray, each time I interview one of the new classes, I think, oh man, I want to be back in the classroom. They haven't made their big name yet, right? But they're on their way. It's so clear, so articulate, so much fun to talk to, so full of life. That hasn't abated at all. Keith, you were saying you didn't know about now. No, I feel it. I feel it when I talk to them.
I agree. I think they still are. Now, what Keith is mentioning is that the culture in Oak Ridge has evolved over the years. But I still think, even with the changes in the demographic makeup of the students, Oak Ridge schools have still continued to be among the highest in the nation, and are continuing to produce some excellent alumni to go out and do the things that you're researching and finding. So we'll continue this as we go on. Keith, we're going to have to make a little detour over the next week or two, and we've got some schedule issues we're dealing with. But we'll have Benita back later in the summer, and we'll continue this series going now. But I'll tell you, next week, we've got a young lady that was in Oak Ridge just a few weeks ago, well, a few days ago now, and was talking about a book she's written, The Half-Life of a Secret.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Emily Strasser, and she's writing about her grandfather, George Strasser.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very interesting perspective on Y12, especially since he was one of the managers at Y12 during the years, especially during the time that they were producing the lithium-6 for the hydrogen bomb. And she has insights into his activities there that are both amazing about what was being done and accomplished, but also some other side of the coin in the family that had to do with mental illness and difficulties that where they were struggling with. And she's brought that out in such a tremendous way that I think I think it'll be good to have her talk about that.
All right.
We'll do that next.
We'll do that next, and we'll have that come out. That'll be a couple of weeks from today. So
let me give just another teaser. You know, the Oppenheimer movie is coming out July the 21st.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough to be able to spend a weekend with Kai Bird, the author of The American Prometheus, the book on which the movie is based.
Mm-hmm.
And by spending that time with him, I convinced him to come and be on a part of Hidden History. So
good.
Try to schedule him before that movie if we can. Now, everybody in the country is trying to get a hold of him now. So,
Sure.
But I think I've got him convinced that this would be a good forum. So, folks, you all are watching our program. I think we've got some exciting things going and some more coming up in the next several weeks that you'll enjoy, as well as continuing with the series with Benita. Thank you, Benita, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And folks, thanks for watching. We'll be back in a couple of weeks.